Millionaire abandons his bride, and years later he sees her with triplets and takes her to court? Hello, welcome. Enjoy and subscribe to the channel. Olivia stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down her gown, her fingers trembling with excitement. Today was the day. In just moments, she'd be walking down the aisle to marry Noah Collins, the man who had swept her off her feet in ways she never thought possible. Noah wasn't just any man. He was charming, successful, and his promise to love her had seemed unshakable. They had met by chance, and the connection had been instant, as if they were meant for each other. He had shown her a world she could hardly imagine, a world of elegant dinners, exotic vacations, and words that made her heart believe in forever. Olivia's life had felt like a fairy tale. But behind that perfect smile, Olivia harbored a few tiny doubts. She'd seen glimpses of Noah's coldness before, in brief flashes, in moments when he grew distant or preoccupied. She had tried to brush it off, telling herself that Noah's business weighed heavily on him, that he was under constant pressure. She wanted so much to believe in the dream he'd offered her. And so, as she looked at herself in the mirror, adjusting her veil, she pushed down that faint unease, convincing herself that all of it was just pre-wedding nerves. She was ready to be Mrs. Noah Collins, ready to commit her life to the man she loved. She was in the midst of her final preparations when her phone rang. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw Noah's name on the screen. Maybe he was calling to tell her how eager he was to see her, to say something sweet before the ceremony. She answered with a smile, "Noah?" But there was silence on the other end, a heavy, drawn-out pause that sent a shiver down her spine. And then his voice came, low and hollow, as if he were speaking from far away. "Olivia, I can't do this." The words hung in the air, suspended like a punch she hadn't seen coming. She blinked, stunned, convinced she must have misheard. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Noah, what are you talking about?" "I'm sorry. I can't go through with it," he repeated, his tone colder, firmer. He didn't offer explanations or apologies, just that blunt, unchangeable truth. She felt the floor beneath her slip away, her heart plummeting as she struggled to process what he was saying. The silence stretched between them, a gulf of confusion and betrayal. In a trembling voice, she tried to hold on, grasping for anything that would make sense. "Noah, please, tell me this is some kind of mistake. We've planned everything. We're supposed to be together. We're in love, aren't we?" There was no kindness, no hesitation in his answer. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I made a mistake. This isn't what I want." With that, he hung up, leaving her alone in the quiet, empty room, the words echoing in her mind. In an instant, her dream life had shattered. The wedding she'd spent months planning, the future she'd imagined with him, gone. Olivia felt herself crumbling, falling to her knees as the reality hit her. Everything she'd built up in her mind, every vision of her future with him, was nothing more than an illusion. The fairy tale had turned into a nightmare. Her friends and family found her minutes later, collapsed on the floor, tears streaming down her face. They tried to comfort her, but how could they? How could anyone truly understand what it felt like to have the love of your life abandon you with such brutal finality, with no explanation, no remorse? As the guests were ushered away and the decorations taken down, Olivia was left standing alone amidst the remnants of her broken dream. She couldn't bear the pitying looks, the whispered condolences, the feeling of being a tragic character in her own story. The days that followed were a blur, filled with sleepless nights and questions she could never answer. Why had he left? What had she done wrong? She went over every conversation, every moment, trying to find something, anything, that would explain why Noah had thrown everything away. And then, just when she thought things couldn't get worse, she discovered something that would change everything. She was pregnant. And not just pregnant, she was carrying triplets. The news hit her like another wave of shock, but this time, it was a different kind of fear. She was going to be a mother. She would have 3 lives depending on her, 3 innocent souls who hadn't asked for this chaos. In the early hours of the morning, alone in her tiny apartment, Olivia wrestled with a mix of despair and determination. Noah was gone, and she had to face the future on her own. She looked around her modest surroundings, the simple furniture, the quiet of the room, and felt the weight of what was to come. She was no longer the woman with dreams of a fairy tale life. She was now a woman with a daunting reality and a set of choices that only she could make. It would be the hardest thing she'd ever done, raising triplets without the support she had once taken for granted. But as the weeks turned into months, Olivia found herself changing. The heartbreak she had felt, the humiliation and betrayal, began to harden into a kind of inner strength. She had lost so much, but she was determined to protect her children, to give them a life filled with love, even if she had to do it alone. Noah Collins might have walked away from her without a backward glance, but she wouldn't walk away from her children. As she felt each kick, each flutter of life within her, she made herself a promise. She would raise these children with a love so fierce and unbreakable that no one would ever be able to take it away. The months that followed were grueling. Olivia was alone, exhausted, and yet somehow more determined than ever. As her pregnancy progressed, she found herself struggling with the realities of her new life. Her body was bearing the weight of not one, but 3 growing babies, and each day was a battle against fatigue, worry, and loneliness. She worked long hours at a small, local cafe, trying to save every penny she could. It was far from glamorous, but she kept going, knowing that soon she would have 3 tiny lives relying on her. When her boys were finally born, it was like a light broke through her darkness. They were beautiful, tiny, and perfect. She named them Ethan, Liam, and Oliver, and the first time she held them in her arms, she felt a love so deep it took her breath away. But it wasn't easy. The days were a whirlwind of feedings, diaper changes, and sleepless nights. Olivia often found herself up at 3 a.m., exhausted and barely holding on, as the cries of one baby woke up the others. She was outnumbered and overwhelmed, but somehow, in the midst of the chaos, she found moments of joy. She'd sit in their tiny nursery, watching their little chests rise and fall, feeling a fierce sense of purpose. Financially, things were harder than she'd ever imagined. Between formula, diapers, and doctor's appointments, Olivia's budget was stretched to the breaking point. She scrimped and saved, choosing carefully between basic necessities. She took on freelance jobs whenever she could, but every day was a balancing act. Sometimes she'd look at the bills piled up on her kitchen counter and wonder how she would make it all work. Yet, whenever she felt herself slipping into despair, one of the boys would flash a tiny, toothless smile, and it reminded her of why she couldn't give up. Friends and family helped where they could, offering babysitting and bringing over meals. But there was a part of Olivia that felt she couldn't let anyone see how much she was struggling. She wanted to prove that she could do this on her own, that she didn't need anyone, not even Noah. She refused to let herself wonder where he was or if he ever thought about her. He had made his choice, and she was done waiting for him to care. As the boys grew older, Olivia began to see more of their personalities. Ethan was curious and loved exploring, constantly reaching for new things. Liam was quieter, a little observer who studied everything around him, while Oliver was the first to laugh, always ready with a bright smile. Watching them grow filled her with pride. They didn't have the luxuries she had once imagined, but they had a mother who adored them and was determined to give them the best life she could. When they started school, Olivia felt a new sense of relief, though the challenges never truly stopped. Juggling work and their schedules was a constant struggle, but she made it work. Every morning, she packed their lunches, double-checked their homework, and walked them to school. Each goodbye was a reminder of how far they'd come together. But 10 years after Noah had left her, just as Olivia had started to feel like she could breathe again, he came back into her life. It was a regular Tuesday morning. She had just dropped the boys off at school and was getting ready for another day of work when she noticed a car she didn't recognize parked outside her apartment. Her heart stopped as she saw him. Noah? He looked older, a little tired, but still carrying that aura of confidence and wealth she remembered so well. She stood there, frozen, as he walked up to her. "Olivia," he said, his voice soft but filled with something she couldn't quite read. "But I wanted to see you." Shock and anger bubbled up inside her. She took a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm. "Noah, what are you doing here?" He shifted uncomfortably, glancing around. "But I just found out about the boys. I didn't know. I had no idea they existed. You didn't tell me." Her heart pounded as she struggled to keep her voice steady. "You didn't know because you left me, Noah. You left me alone on our wedding day without a word. Did you really expect me to come running after you with news of a pregnancy?" There was a flicker of regret in his eyes, but she wasn't about to let herself be swayed. She had spent too many nights crying, too many years fighting to give her children the life they deserved. Noah's return didn't change any of that. "I know I made a mistake," he said, looking down, "but I want to be a part of their lives. I want to make it right." Olivia stared at him, her heart racing with a mix of fear and anger. How could he think he could just waltz back into their lives after all this time? She thought of her boys, how much she'd sacrificed, and she felt a fierce need to protect them from any more hurt. "Noah, they don't even know you," she said, her voice firm. "You can't just show up after 10 years and expect to be their father. You gave up that right the moment you left." But Noah wasn't alone. Standing in the shadows was a woman, watching them with a calculating look. She was tall, elegant, and looked every bit the part of someone who belonged in Noah's world. Olivia didn't need an introduction to know this was Charlotte, Noah's fiancée. The woman stepped forward, her voice dripping with a cool, unsettling confidence. "It's only fair that Noah has a chance to know his sons," Charlotte said, her tone almost dismissive, as if Olivia's objections were nothing more than an inconvenience. "We'll be in touch." As Olivia watched them walk away, her heart pounded with a familiar fear. It was clear that Charlotte wanted something from her, something she wasn't willing to give up. And deep down, Olivia knew this wasn't over. Noah and Charlotte would be back, and they'd be prepared to fight. But Olivia had spent a decade fighting alone, and she wasn't about to let anyone take away the life she'd built with her sons. Days later, Olivia received a letter that sent her reeling. It was an official court document. Noah was suing for custody of the boys. She clutched the paper, feeling her world tilt. The realization hit her like a punch. Noah was serious, and he had the resources to make this a brutal, drawn-out battle. She thought of the life she had built for her sons, the sacrifices she'd made, and felt a wave of fear. Not long after, she sat across from Noah in a tense mediation room, with Charlotte at his side. Olivia had no lawyer. She couldn't afford one. She had only her fierce love for her boys and a resolve that had been forged over 10 years of doing this on her own. Noah barely met her eyes, but Charlotte's gaze was fixed on her, sharp and unrelenting. "Let's be realistic, Olivia," Charlotte began, her tone cool and practiced. "You're working long hours, struggling to make ends meet. We can give the boys a stable home, the kind of life they deserve. Think about what's best for them." Olivia's hands clenched beneath the table. "I am what's best for them," she said, her voice firm. "I've been there since day one. I'm their mother." Charlotte's smile was thin, condescending. "Yes, and I'm sure you've done your best, but Noah is their father. He has the resources, the means to provide them a life you simply can't." Olivia looked at Noah, searching his face for any hint of the man she had once loved, the man she had trusted with her heart. But he sat there, his gaze averted, seemingly unwilling to confront her pain. Her voice trembled, but her determination was solid. "They've had a life filled with love and stability. Just because you suddenly decide to show up doesn't give you the right to take them away." As the mediation ended, Olivia felt her heart pound with both fear and defiance. She knew this wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. The next few weeks were a nightmare of court dates and accusations. Charlotte's lawyers painted Olivia as an unfit mother, claiming that her financial struggles and long work hours left the boys neglected. They dredged up every hardship Olivia had endured, twisting her efforts to make a better life for her children into proof that she was failing them. One day, as she was leaving the courthouse, Noah caught up with her in the hallway, his face softened with something that looked like guilt. "Olivia, this isn't what I wanted. I want to know my sons. You have to understand that." She stopped, her gaze burning. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to them? You think they'll ever forgive you for trying to tear their family apart? Because I won't let that happen, Noah. I will fight for them." Noah's eyes flickered with something she couldn't read. But whatever doubts he might have felt were quickly dismissed the moment Charlotte arrived, her hand possessively on his arm, her eyes daring Olivia to push back. Charlotte was always there, orchestrating every move, every argument, every twist in the case. She was relentless, as if this were a business transaction, a game that had to be won. Over the next few weeks, Olivia's life became an endless cycle of work and court appearances. She was exhausted, frayed at the edges, but the thought of her sons gave her strength. Ethan, Liam, and Oliver didn't fully understand what was happening, but they sensed her stress, sensed something was wrong. One night, as she was tucking them into bed, Oliver looked up at her with worried eyes. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" Her heart twisted, and she forced herself to smile. "Of course, sweetheart. Nothing's going to happen to us. I promise." But she knew the promise was fragile. Each day in court, each hearing felt like she was standing on thin ice, trying to keep her family from falling through. She faced accusations that tore at her heart, suggestions that she wasn't enough for her sons, that she had failed them. But amidst the storm, something began to shift. Noah started to show signs of hesitation. He watched Olivia as she defended herself on the stand, saw the fierce love and resilience in her eyes. He heard her voice crack when she spoke of the nights she'd stayed up with sick children, of the times she'd gone without so they wouldn't have to. And little by little, he began to realize the cost of this battle. One afternoon, after another exhausting court session, Noah approached her, his face troubled. "Olivia, I didn't know things were this hard for you." She looked at him, her eyes weary but resolute. "Because you never asked, Noah. You walked away without a second thought, and now you're here, acting like you have a right to take them from me. Do you know what that feels like?" He was silent, guilt shadowing his face. For the first time, it seemed as if he was seeing her, truly seeing her, for everything she had endured. But whatever guilt or regret he might have felt was quickly overshadowed by Charlotte's cold determination. She was adamant, pushing him to continue the fight, whispering in his ear about what was best for the boys. In one of their final hearings, Olivia took the stand, her voice breaking as she recounted the sacrifices she'd made, the love she had poured into every moment of raising her sons. She didn't plead or beg. She simply told the truth. "These boys are my life," she said, her voice steady. "I have fought for them every day since they were born. I may not be wealthy, but I love them with everything I have. And no amount of money or comfort could ever replace that." In the quiet that followed, she saw Noah's face. He looked as though he were battling something deep inside, a struggle between loyalty to Charlotte and the realization of what he had almost done. She saw the man he once was, the man she had once loved, fighting to emerge beneath the layers of pride and manipulation. When the judge finally ruled in her favor, Olivia felt an overwhelming wave of relief and gratitude. She had won the right to keep her family together. Noah would be granted visitation rights, but full custody would remain with her. As the court cleared, Noah approached her, his expression softened, almost vulnerable. "I didn't know, Olivia. I didn't know you had to go through all this. I'm sorry." She nodded, swallowing the pain and the anger that still lingered. "Just be there for them, Noah. That's all I ever wanted." With that, she walked away, her heart heavy but victorious. She had fought and won, not just for herself, but for her sons. They were her strength, her reason, and as she left the courthouse, she knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. In the months that followed, life slowly began to settle back into place. Olivia poured herself into her boys, savoring each ordinary moment that now felt like a victory. There were still challenges, late nights juggling bills, long days at work, and the endless balancing act of being both mother and provider. But after everything, Olivia felt stronger. She had faced her deepest fear and come out on the other side with her family intact. Noah's visits began, awkward at first. The boys were shy, uncertain around him. To them, he was a stranger, someone who had suddenly appeared in their lives and nearly taken them from their mother. But Noah was patient. He spent weekends with them, playing catch in the park, helping them with homework, and learning the rhythms of their lives. Charlotte, however, was rarely present. She showed up occasionally, her polished smile tight, her eyes appraising, but the boys never warmed to her. They sensed the tension she carried, the subtle resentment she couldn't quite hide. Olivia had initially braced herself for another battle, expecting Charlotte to sow discord, but to her surprise, Charlotte's appearances became less and less frequent. It was as though she had lost interest once the custody fight was over. One evening, as the boys were playing in the living room, Noah knocked on Olivia's door, holding a small bag of groceries. She opened the door, surprised to see him without the boys. He hesitated, then gestured toward the bag. I thought you might need some help with dinner." She let him in, and they worked in silence for a while, chopping vegetables, stirring pots, the kitchen filled with a quiet, shared focus. After a while, Noah broke the silence. "Charlotte and we ended things. It just wasn't working anymore." Olivia wasn't surprised. She'd seen the strain between them in court, the way Charlotte had pulled him one way while his guilt had tugged him another. But still, she nodded, unsure how to respond. Noah set down the knife he was holding, turning to face her. "I was wrong, Olivia. About everything. I walked away when I should have stayed, and then I almost made the biggest mistake of my life, trying to take the boys from you." His voice softened, heavy with regret. "You didn't deserve that. They didn't deserve that." Olivia met his gaze, seeing a vulnerability there that she hadn't seen in years. She had waited so long to hear those words, but now that they were here, she felt only a quiet sadness. "You hurt us, Noah," she said, her voice steady. "You hurt me. And you hurt them by trying to take them from the only family they've ever known." He nodded, swallowing. "I know. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I want to be there for them, however you'll allow it." They stood there, the air thick with memories, with pain, and maybe, just maybe, the smallest thread of understanding. Olivia took a deep breath, nodding. "Then be there for them, Noah. Show up, keep showing up, and let them see who you really are." From that moment, Noah began to truly integrate himself into their lives. He helped with school projects, took them to baseball games, and even attended parent-teacher conferences with Olivia. At first, it felt strange, seeing him there, sharing in the responsibilities she had shouldered alone for so long. But over time, Olivia noticed the boys starting to warm up to him. Ethan would excitedly show him his drawings, Liam started asking him questions about things he'd read, and Oliver, always the quickest to forgive, often held his hand as they walked to the car after a visit. Olivia found a quiet pride in watching her sons grow closer to their father. She hadn't realized how much it mattered to her until she saw them laughing together, sharing inside jokes, and looking forward to their weekends with him. It didn't erase the past, but it felt like a step towards something better, something whole. As the years went by, Noah and Olivia fell into a comfortable co-parenting routine. They still had their moments of tension, old wounds that resurfaced now and then, but they had learned to communicate, to put their sons first. Olivia never let herself hope for reconciliation beyond that. She was content with the life she had built, the peace she had found. Eventually, Olivia went back to school, studying accounting part-time, and over the years, she built a stable career. Her boys grew up surrounded by love and stability, thriving in school, making friends, discovering their passions. There were bumps along the way, teenage arguments, broken curfews, and the occasional slammed door, but they faced them together. One day, As they sat together at Oliver's high school graduation, Olivia felt a swell of pride and nostalgia. The boys were nearly grown now, taller than her, their faces sharp with the edges of adulthood. Noah sat beside her, their relationship now one of mutual respect and shared history. After the ceremony, as they stood in the parking lot, watching the graduates stream past, Noah turned to her. "We did good, Olivia," he said softly, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You did good." She smiled back, the years of struggle and heartache now softened by time. "We did," she agreed, feeling a quiet peace settle within her. The boys came running over, excitedly recounting their plans for the summer, and for a moment, Olivia simply watched them, marveling at the family she had fought so hard to protect. There was a calm in her heart, a certainty that had eluded her for so long. She had built a life she was proud of, a life that was rich in love and resilience. As they all piled into the car, driving off toward a family dinner, Olivia looked out the window, taking in the familiar streets, the setting sun casting a warm glow over everything. Life had not been what she'd once envisioned. It had been harder, messier, filled with moments of pain and doubt. But in the end, it had led her here, to this moment of joy, surrounded by the family she loved. In that quiet moment, with her boys' laughter filling the car and Noah's content smile in the rearview mirror, Olivia knew she had found everything she'd ever truly needed. She was home. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.